Good evening, friends. We have with us an eminent speaker, Sunil Bhai Gabawala. Mr. Sunil Gabawala. He's a renowned chartered accountant. He's a ranker. He's ranked third in in Davis Chartered Accountant exams, and he's a ranker in also ICWA. For all to know, he's also a trainer.
Hello.
And he has delivered a number of sessions. I request everybody to please can we mute our systems, please?
Hello.
All of us.
No expense job.
Request everybody to mute their systems, please. It's disturbing. Can we mute the systems, please? Yes, thank you. Sorry, Sunil Bhai. Just a quick introduction, then we'll move on. So, friends, we are here. I'll start all over again. We are here to have a very interesting session on GST and the challenges that we are facing. And we have a very eminent speaker, a chartered accountant with us, Sunil Bhai Gabawala. I have known of him and I've heard of him for many years. And I have had one or two interactions when GST was being introduced. So a quick introduction. He is a renowned chartered accountant, eminent speaker. He's a ranker. He ranked third in his chartered accountant exams. He's an ICWA ranker. Mr. Sunil Gabawala is also a trainer's trainer. He delivers lecture at NASEN. He conducts sessions for the various officers in the field of service tax, GST, and income tax. He has published many articles. He's also rated amongst the 10 top GST consultants in India. So we are extremely privileged to have Mr. Sunil Gabawala with us, who is going to share some insights about some pain points that we are having currently. And also, I request all participants to please keep their systems on mute, please.
Admin, I think, Nilesh, at least 10 or 12 people have not muted themselves. So maybe admin can mute them. At least 10 or 12 people I can say I have not muted.
So, admin, can you please mute? I requested earlier also.
Yeah, I'll try and do that. Yeah.
Yeah, please. So we have Sunil Bhai with us. Sorry for all this disturbance, but we have Sunil Bhai with us who will speak about some important points on GST and some of the pain points that we are facing, or some of the challenges that we are expected to face in the new regime. And Sunil Bhai is happy to address all the questions that you all have. So we will request each participant to post their questions in the chat box. And we have also received some questions from various members of our association, which also we will be posting them from time to time. So without spending much time on any other formalities, I would like to hand over to Sunil Bhai. Welcome, Sunil Bhai. And Sunil Bhai, over to you. And thank you for being here for our industry.
Thank you, Nilesh Bhai. It's my pleasure to be speaking to the employee members on this evergreen topic of GST. Earlier, we had service tax and now GST. And when we look at logistics sector, this is one sector which has had its own fair share of complications and difficulties from the department's perspective because of a very myopic interpretation of some of the provisions. And I'm sure many of the members sitting here must have faced some type of a notice either from the service tax or from the GST authorities or during the last few years. And I'm also aware and sensitized to the fact that in many cases, the quantum of taxes demanded and the penalties imposed through such orders or notices is sufficient enough to destabilize the entire business operations also at times. And that's where I think having a correct understanding of the indirect tax regime becomes very important when we look at the logistics sector in particular. Without much ado, I will just spend 20-25 minutes, the time allotted to me, to give sort of a keynote on what are the key challenges which we as an experience have faced in the logistics sector vis-a-vis the GST and indirect taxes. And while doing that, we'll also try to walk through some of the important provisions. Maybe some of your questions may get addressed in this discussion. And wherever they are not getting addressed, please feel free to put it in the chat. And Nilesh has agreed to moderate the chat session, question answer session thereafter, so that we can have a full value out of the 1 hour in the afternoon during these pandemic times which we are spending together. To this August audience, I don't need to explain to you the detailed shipping process. As far as international logistics is concerned, it's a chain of events starting from from the place where the shipper wants to ship his goods, all the way going to the end destination where the consignee wants to receive his goods. And as we are all aware that this process has multiple legs into it. Assuming a particular export process and similar process would happen in an import shipment as well, there is something known as an export haulage, which brings the goods right from the shipper's warehouse to the port origin warehouse. And from there is a handling which is involved at the port. And from the port, thereafter, there is a transportation either by sea or by air, which we will say is ocean or air freight. At the destination location, there is a destination handling at the port involved, bringing it into a debonded warehouse at the destination. And thereafter, there is an import haulage at the destination place where the goods move from the destination warehouse to the consignee. Now, we are all aware that when you look at this chain of events, there are multiple deliverables, multiple activities which are involved in the entire logistics process. And right from 2002, there has always been a challenge on whether one will treat these transactions as a bundled services or as divisible services. And this discussion becomes very important because many a times logistics service providers go to a exporter in India and undertake door-to-door shipments, D2D shipments as we generally say. And I'm aware that there are various other variations depending on Incoterms and depending on the commercial negotiations between the logistics company and the particular customer. However, it's not very infrequent, or rather I would say there are very many examples where the logistics company negotiates a composite rate and there are tendering processes for all of this to undertake door-to-door shipment. And way back in the service tax regime, there has always been a doubt in the minds of the people whether these types of door-to-door shipments where you have some elements of road transportation, sometimes rail transportation. In many cases, you would also have a lot of loading, unloading and storage activities involved. And invariably, you will have an ocean freight or a sea freight or an air freight involved. When we have these types of activity, and when you have specific international legislations which cover the multimodal transportation against an MTD receipt, the questions which came up was, would you go ahead and split these composite contracts and treat individual contracts and demand the taxes based on the individual activities? Or will you treat it as a lump and treat it as a multimodal transportation and a single contract? Not to go into too much of technical details, of course, there is a good argument to say that these are composite contracts, but the industry, by its own conduct, has tried to split the contract way back in 2004, 2006. And around that time, because of certain uncertainties, the industry took a position that each of the activities which are mentioned in the earlier slide constitute a separate contract, a separate divisible activity, and each of them has to be looked at to decide the tax implications. We are aware that earlier there was something known as a terminal handling charge, which typically covers some component of the activities where there is a tax always being applicable. But freight, because it's an international freight, receives a special treatment and there had not been a major tax implication in the past on that front. So these distinct tax treatments, all of us have more or less agreed upon, despite the fact that there might be a composite contract, despite the fact that you might enter into a seamless activity right from the doorsteps of the consignor, reaching all the way to the doorsteps of the consignor. And that's where we had a little bit of a comfort to say that, yes, we will go by the divisible contract theory, look at individual deliverables and decide the tax implications accordingly. But while all of this was happening, a couple of years back, we had a very specific entry, subclause 6, entry 9, which was introduced to specifically tax multimodal transportation. This again, there was a tax rate of 12% for multimodal transportation, and it continues to exist even today. And this again started creating a lot of difficulty for the trade and a lot of sleepless nights. Thereafter, based on various representations, then explanation was added to that entry to say that the entry applies only to domestic multimodal transportation. Now, why is the challenge coming? The challenge comes because international freight to a large extent is exempted. And therefore, when the law prescribes a multimodal tax rate of 12%, and multimodal will necessarily include the ocean freight or international air freight. Therefore, indirectly, it was this tax rate entry was trying to tax something which was ideally exempted. And that's where, based on representation, sanity prevailed. And we now have an explanation which says that the said entry of 12% multimodal transportation applies only for domestic multimodal transportation and not for international multimodal transportation. And therefore, effectively, I would believe that we should concentrate on the aspect that the industry itself breaks up the supply and treats each element as a divisible element warranting a separate and a distinct tax treatment. Now, my entire presentation and the answers to the questions which will be raised will be on the basis of this assumption, because if this assumption is done away with, then the answers will change drastically. And I am sure that nobody in the industry is looking at that thought process. So I do not want to unsettle a settled proposition. And I would also go by that generic thought process, though my personal views may be slightly different. We will assume that an ocean freight or an air freight will receive a separate treatment as compared to a THC or an IHC or various other charges which are recovered by the logistics company. And basis the assumption that, yes, this is possible to break it up and have separate tax treatments, we will discuss the possible tax treatments. And when we are looking at possible tax treatments, I think the first thing which we will have to look at is the air and the sea freight, the international freight which has been collected. And as we are aware, through a series of exemption notifications, most of it is sought to be exempted. So we have sea export freight, which is exempted under a particular entry, whether it is prepaid or collect. Because this is an industry forum, I'm not going into the technical interpretation of these words. If there are any doubts on what I'm speaking about, they can come up in the question answer session after my talk is over. Similarly, as far as air export is concerned, again, prepaid or a collect, both of them are exempted under a particular entry. Air import freight also is exempted irrespective of whether it's prepaid or collect. That leaves us with only the red marked area here, the aspect of sea import, where there is no exemption, but there is a 5% tax rate applicable. Now, as we are aware, sea import can happen either collect basis or prepaid. Now, if it is a sea import collect, then necessarily you have an Indian company dealing with another Indian customer who wants a foreign consignment to be coming into India. And therefore, he arranges for the sea import freight, and this becomes taxable at 5%. Similarly, we are told that even if the freight is prepaid by the foreign party, the importer of goods becomes liable to pay tax under RCM at 5%. There is this entry where the CIF imports are taxed in the hands of the importer of goods. Of course, this has been a subject matter of litigation, and there have been a couple of decisions, one in the service tax regime and one under the GST regime, both of them from the Gujarat High Court, holding that the importer of goods cannot be made liable to pay GST under RCM for the prepaid component of the import freight in a CIF consignment. So those matters are, there are favorable Gujarat High Court decisions, and the matter is right now pending in the Supreme Court. We will have to wait for the outcome of the Supreme Court. I would believe that the Gujarat High Court decisions have correctly analyzed the legal position, and ideally in a prepaid sea import freight shipment, there shouldn't be a tax. It's only in a collect shipment where the contract of freight is between two Indian parties that one can examine the taxability at the rate of 5% for the ocean freight. So this is as far as air or sea freight is concerned. The exemptions are timed, and every year when the timeline expires, there are some sleepless nights which come in. But end of the day, the government keeps on extending that exemption notification and the timelines. So all in all, there is no tax on international transactions except for sea import freight, whether collect or prepaid. That takes me to the road freight component, because you would have local haulages and destination haulages. And that's where we have a lot of challenges in the day-to-day activity. When you look at road transport, GTA was one of the first entries to be introduced under the service tax regime. And when it was introduced, the transport operators protested. And as a logjam, we had a problem of the government not wanting to remove the tax. At the same time, transport was not budging. And that's when we in service tax for the first time introduced a concept called reverse charge mechanism way back in 1997. And that reverse charge mechanism then kept on expanding to various other things. But this GTA reverse charge continues even today. So as we all are aware, GTA is defined by the fact that there is a transporter who arranges to transport goods by road, and he issues a consignment note by whatever name called. And therefore, the consignment note, and in the service tax regime, we have lots of decisions holding that the consignment note is the axis on the basis of which you determine whether a transaction is a GTA or not. And then we are told that for a GTA transaction, generally there will be a reverse charge mechanism whereby the person who is liable to pay the freight will pay the GST at the rate of 5%. And of course, there will be no input tax credit available to the supplier. And in GST, naturally, there was a transport sector. Some of the players in the transport sector who are the organized players represented to the government that this results in a huge loss of input tax credit. So somewhere in October 17, the government brought in an option to the transporters to choose between an RCM at the rate of 5% or forward charge at the rate of 12%. So GTA has a choice of collecting 12% under forward charge mechanism. If he does that, he gets input tax credit. Otherwise, he may just stay safe and say, I will just put RCM, and RCM will be paid by the person paying the freight. There will be no input tax credit available to the transporter. Now, both these options have to be exercised at the start of the event, and thereafter you cannot shift from one option to the other. It is vis-a-vis each registered person. Now, while we have this type of a provision of 5 or 12% tax, a second entry says that if there is any transportation of goods by road, otherwise than by way of a GTA, then it becomes exempted from GTA. And there has always been a question that what does this cover? And I would believe that this covers two types of activities. One is a person who supplies a transport vehicle to a GTA, either as a road transport service or as a hiring service. Those types of activities would be road transportation, but because he does not issue a consignment note and the consignment note is issued by the GTA, these transactions become exempted from GST. Now compare these simpliciter cases of transportation with a case of a courier agency or a logistics service provider who undertakes transportation, but also undertakes many other activities like loading, unloading, sometimes inbound warehousing and manufacturing, storage, invoicing on behalf of the customer. And typically this set of people try to evolve themselves as logistics support service providers. And they said that, look, transport is just one side of this entire activity. It's not the main activity. My main activity has many aspects to it. And therefore we want to say that this is taxable under forward charge mechanism at the rate of 18%. Along with all of this, we also need to bear in mind that there are certain specified commodities, including agricultural produce, where there is an exemption from road transportation and the GST is not payable. Now, when you look at all these permutations and combinations, you end up with situations as well as difficulties. And I would just take two examples from a road freight just to explain how the industry can also look at very diametrically opposite positions at times. And as we all know that many a scenario, the consignor or the consignee may not be directly interacting with the GTA, but would have intermediaries or representatives like a clearing forwarding agent or a CHA or a logistics company interposed in between. Now, when you have those types of intermediaries interposed in between, how would entities look at it? So let's look at two specific examples. One example concerning international consignments. And as we all are aware that there will be a vehicle owner who will provide his vehicle to the GTA. A custom house agent who undertakes export-import clearances would obtain the services of this GTA, and he would recover the amount from the exporter-importer along with his clearance charges. This is a very standard transaction structure in the industry. The questions which were there in service tax and which also bother in the GST regime is, the first transaction between the vehicle owner and the GTA is exempted because of the exemption notification we discussed a few minutes back. But what happens to the next transactions? More specifically, when the GTA is paid an X amount by the CHA, does the custom house agent have to pay the tax under reverse charge as the first question? Or will the reverse charge mechanism tax be paid by the exporter or the importer? Now, friends, I understand the industry has evolved over a period of time, and I think there are two possible propositions which one can make. One is to say that this intermediary, the custom house agent, acts as an agent in procuring the road freight services. Now, as we know, the concept of agency itself will imply the satisfaction of around 8 to 10 tests, which have been laid down under the old service tax law as well as under the GST law. Now, if you are able to collect the like-to-like amount, there is a documentation and there is a separate contract enabling the custom house agent to obtain the services from the GTA for and on behalf of the exporter-importer. He will say that, look, I am merely an agent. It is the exporter-importer who is really the payer of the freight. And therefore, the exporter-importer will pay the service tax or the GST under the reverse charge mechanism. As far as the CHA is concerned, he will only treat it as a balance sheet item, wherein he will first pay to the GTA and then recover it from the exporter or the importer. Now, this is one type of a position which is possible, where RCM is paid by the final entity and the agency takes a position that I am only an intermediary and I am claiming a reimbursement of expenditure. But one important impediment here is that the CHA may not have a margin in this. Now, in real life, what happens is, because exporters, importers at times negotiate very strongly on the clearance fee or the agency charges, therefore, many custom house agents are forced to have a markup in these types of supplies or services, procured by them from third parties. Now, if that happens, let us say that the GTA charges 5,000 and the amount recovered from the exporter is 8,000. In that case, the CHA cannot any longer say that I am an agent. In that case, on the 8,000, he would be required to charge GST at the full value, and he becomes a consumer of the transport service. And on that transport service, CHA himself will pay the reverse charge mechanism at his end and claim input tax credit. Now, these are the two scenarios which are possible in international consignment. I am aware that the industry, each player would have picked up either one of these, where in various cases, we have also, according to me, either of those scenarios can be defended and is possible. However, what we have seen is there have been mix and matches. Now, you cannot have a mix and match. You can either have a scenario one where you are treating yourself as an agent and claiming a reimbursement, and therefore RCM shifts to the third party itself, or the second scenario where you are treating yourself as a principal, you pay RCM, claim input tax credit, and charge full GST to the customer. Now, as compared to that, when we come to the domestic consignments, similar situation may exist in domestic consignments also, but an innovative model which at times comes up is a scenario where, because we want to maintain the credit chain, the GTA chooses a forward charge mechanism at 12%. The logistics company imposes itself, superimposes itself and says that, look, I am not a transport service provider, but I am a logistics service provider, and charges a full 18% GST to the entity and original manufacturer, who in turn claims the credit. Now, this, according to me, is possible, but I'm aware that there are a couple of advanced rulings which hold otherwise and say that no, the logistics company itself becomes a GTA, and therefore reverse charge mechanism should trigger at the OEM level. So that is as far as the road freight is concerned. Now comes the second aspect vis-a-vis the other charges, and that's where I think the basic difference which comes is in the case of place of supply. We are aware that place of supply is an important parameter In case of Indian customers, it helps you. It does not decide whether you are taxable or not. It only decides whether you will charge CGST, SGST or IGST. As far as foreign customers are concerned, it helps you in deciding whether there is a zero rating or an export benefit available to you or not. So when we look at this industry, as far as freight is concerned, we are told that the destination of goods becomes the important parameter for determining the place of supply. Now, when you say destination of goods is an important parameter for determining the place of supply, specifically in the case of Indian customer, this can result in a place of supply conflict. So we are having scenarios where a Maharashtra-based logistics company would charge to another Maharashtra customer for an international shipment, but despite both of the entities being in Maharashtra, the tax will be charged as IGST because the destination of the export goods is outside India. Now, this results in difficulties both in terms of filing of return at the logistics company end, as well as claiming of credit at the customer's end. So this is a sort of an amendment which was brought a couple of years back. I would say the intentions were noble from the government side, but the way it has been defined, it creates a lot of difficulty. As far as charges other than freight is concerned, for the Indian customer, we are asked to look at the address of the customer. The transaction remains taxable, but based on the GSTN, it's very convenient that you can charge IGST or C plus SGST depending on the GSTN of the customer. But as far as foreign customers are concerned, for freight, you look at the destination of goods and therefore it may qualify as exports in certain cases. But for other than freight, you have to look at the performance of the activity. Now, this is very important because the services rendered by logistics companies are primarily in relation to goods. The place of supply will be determined based on the performance of activity. And we are aware of the difficulties which come because you might have an Indian THC charged at an Indian port to a foreign client. Now, in those cases, even though you have a dollar billing, you might be receiving money in convertible foreign exchange. The transaction remains taxable because the activity relating to the haulage is happening in the Indian territories and therefore the tax becomes payable. Now, of course, the last slide we'll talk about is a couple of issues which are evergreen issues under the logistics sector. And the first issue which I started my entire discussion, and I'm sure there are plethora of show cause notices and even orders nowadays which deal with this concept of freight forwarding. Now, as this entire industry knows, the freight forwarding can be on a principal-to-principal basis, or someone might just act as a commission agent in helping a shipping line in marketing his goods or marketing the services of the shipping line. Now, there are various reasons to say that when an intermediary who is at times issuing his own house bill, at times may not be issuing a house bill, but also undertaking aggregation of various consignments, where at times also resulting in consolidation or transshipment, is a contracting carrier. He becomes a contracting carrier. He may not own the airline or a aircraft or a vessel, but he is not the performing carrier, but he is a contracting carrier. And we are aware that FIMDA rules do talk about there being a contracting carrier and the liability of the contracting carrier. Now, when there are two carriers, one a performing carrier, another a contracting carrier, the shipping line, which is the performing carrier, might charge a certain amount as a freight to the contracting carrier, which is the logistics company or the MTO or NVOCC or whatever it may be. Different classifications exist within the industry. That entity consumes these services and it provides a service on a principal-to-principal basis, which also is in the nature of a freight service. Now, in the service tax regime, because freight was excluded from the payment of service tax, the department tried to confuse itself between these P2P supplies as a freight forwarding and a commission income earned by various agents appointed by the airlines and the shipping lines. And therefore, they started to raise notices for freight difference. Things became a little bit complicated because the accounting practice in many transporters and this industry was not to treat the entire freight as a expense as a purchase and a freight income as sale. Many of them treated all of this as a balance sheet item, and only the income, the difference, was shown in the P&L account as a net income. Now, all of this resulted in litigation. Lots of cases have happened. Our office itself has an entire desk and a partner in charge dealing with these types of cases. And that's the level of expertise which has got developed over a period of time. So what happens is all these show cause notices say that you are indirectly earning a commission income and please pay me service tax or please pay me GST on that commission. I don't care that the freight is exempted. What you are doing is not freight. What you are doing is only marketing. I would believe that this is a hilarious proposition. We already have quite a lot of decisions from the tribunals and the courts holding that this freight forwarding on a principal to principal basis is not liable as a commission income. It will be liable as freight as and when it is made taxable. As of now, as we saw in the first slide, a majority of the freight is exempted. It's only sea import which is taxable. While this issue is sort of getting resolved as now at the judicial levels, for the periods 15, 16, 16, 17, and some periods of 17, 18, the department has started blindly issuing notices based on difference between income tax data and service tax data. Now, because freight has always remained exempted from payment of service tax, it wouldn't appear in the service tax returns of most of the taxpayers. But at the same time, there would be some TDS deducted by the customer on this freight, and there would be an income disclosed in the income tax return. And therefore, blindly, the government, various officers have issued notices saying that, look, I can see a turnover of 10 crores in your income tax return, but I can only see that you have paid service tax on 50 lakhs. Now, if there is a difference between these two, it means that you have not paid the tax, and therefore a show cause notice is been issued on that front. Again, in these types of notices, the primary reason is that the difference would primarily be on account of freight, which has been exempted, and suitable responses need to be drafted for each of these. My only advice on all these notices, let it be service tax or GST, is yes, we have to draft a very proper reply. We have to make sure that we appear before the authorities in time and put our best foot forward. At the same time, it's also important for people not to get unnecessarily panicky. We need to rest assured in our thought process that yes, this is something which is a frivolous or a baseless notice, and definitely at some point of time we will win. And that patience is what is very important as far as this issue is concerned. Now, when we are looking at this entire aspect, there are also international arrangements in the nature of forwarding. And many a times what happens is we define foreign agents. And we also might act as agents for some foreign consolidators or freight forwarders. Now, these types of arrangements, very loosely, the industry says these are profit sharing arrangements. Now, when we analyze these arrangements, there are the major challenge which we see is most of these arrangements are not documented. There is no formal agreement between the foreign correspondent or the agent and the Indian counterpart or the other way around. But based on discussions and debates and various emails and various different corroborative evidences, we could classify these arrangements into two possible scenarios. One scenario is a scenario where it's actually a principal to principal model. In a way, just like we talked about the first example of there being a performing carrier and a contracting carrier, one would say that the contracting carrier has one more leg, which is the third contracting carrier. So just like you have a freight forwarding on a principal to principal basis, even such profit sharing arrangements can be made on a principal to principal basis. Now, in those types of scenarios, you might be making a net payment for an import freight. Now, if you make a net payment for an import freight, clearly, if it's a sea freight, there is as we saw in the earlier slides, there is a tax applicable on it. So therefore, on the net payment, you might be required to pay a tax on that under the reverse charge mechanism. However, if you are receiving the money from the foreigner for an export freight happening from India, necessarily because the destination of goods is outside India, and you are receiving money in convertible foreign exchange, these types of net receipts would not be taxable in India. However, it's important that you document this proposition as a principal to principal arrangement, either by way of a purchase order or by way of an agreement. If you don't do that, maybe even over here, you will get various types of notices and you will have to fight out as far as just like the freight forwarding sector, the fight is there for the domestic trade. Same thing will happen over here as well. However, I am also aware that there are large logistics providers who might have defined agents, exclusive agents in foreign countries. And those agents would have a role of providing a marketing support or an administrative support. Now, typically in these types of scenarios, you will be making a remittance to them. And when you make a remittance to the agent for their fees, those remittances would not be liable for GST because this would qualify as a what is known as an intermediary service. So, of course, I'm aware that there could be various different models in the practical parlance, and maybe we can take them up one by one as we go into the by the various participants. I think it was all that I thought it's important to set the context in which the questions are raised. And therefore, I think this is my understanding of the law. I am now open for questions, and over to you, Nailish.
Thank you, Sunil Bhai. I hope you can hear me. Thank you, Sunil Bhai.
Yes.
Very, very enlightening, crisp, to the point. And this presentation speaks about your knowledge of our industry and our pain points. So you're one person who knows all our pains and our problems. So, and we are looking forward for the solutions also. So without taking much time, we have many questions which have come in. So we will start with each question one by one. So I'll just communicate the question for all to also understand. We have our colleague, Mr. Raj Maru, who has a question where there are consignments which are coming on, import consignments which are coming on prepaid basis. And because they have done a joint agreement or a joint sales, though it's a prepaid shipment, the agent shares some profit with the Indian counterpart. In such a situation, he would like to know what is the implication of the profit that he receives as an amount from his agent directly. These prepaid amounts are either through a house bill of lading or through a master bill of lading. And his also question is, what kind of an invoice should we raise?
So Raj, yeah, this is a little bit of a different example than what I had listed down. This example, as I understand, is an import freight, and the import freight is prepaid. And therefore, in India, you are not going to receive any freight from an Indian shipper or a consignee. Therefore, please note, for you, the amount which you receive cannot qualify as a freight revenue. That is the starting point of discussion. Now, when you're looking at this entire arrangement, how would one look at it? I would believe that the foreign counterpart is providing a freight service to the foreign shipper. That transaction has no tax implications in India. But from the profit earned by the foreign counterpart, 50% is given back to you. Naturally, this money is given back to you for various reasons. One reason is you are providing an administrative support when the consignment comes into India. The second reason is perhaps you might have introduced the parties to each other, or maybe because of a long-term arrangement with the overseas counterpart. Now, in either of those three cases, there is some element of service given by you to the overseas counterpart, and that service moves in the area of marketing support, and therefore it would become liable for GST. So my answer to this question is yes, the profit share received in India for this type of a transaction would be liable for GST. And the rate would be the normal 18%. I'm aware the industry nets off these transactions, and there are various conflicting tax treatments offered by various people. But what I will share is what I believe is the correct answer.
Sunil Bhai's next part of the question was, what should be the description on the invoice that he raises for the, let's say it's a $50 or $100.
I would say it should be either administrative or a marketing support, depending on what you are actually doing.
Thank you, Sunil Bhai. I will go to the next question. This is an operational question. When somebody uploads information on GST, can someone go and edit the GST amount that is already uploaded? Rectification, can there be an online correction?
Okay. So it's a a little bit, depending on what type of error you have done, the law does permit you to rectify a transaction, and that rectification is permitted up to the September of the next financial year. So if you are looking at a transaction of financial year 2021, the rectification will be permitted up to September return of the next financial year by 20th October.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, or it seems it's on a third party, whether import of services is applicable in case of logistic services rendered by an overseas supplier outside India and billed to a freight forwarder in India in case of cross-country shipments. So I'll put it differently. The customer is an Indian, the service provider is an Indian, the port of loading is outside India, the final destination is also outside India.
Yeah.
And the Indian service provider is taking services of his counterpart outside India.
I would believe that if it is an ocean freight, there would be a reverse charge mechanism payable by the freight forwarder in India. When he further recovers this money from the Indian customer, he would charge GST and the input tax credit will be available for the tax paid under RCM. So there are 3 steps here. When he makes a remittance to the foreign party, there will be an RCM. He will immediately claim input tax credit of the RCM so paid. And thereafter, when he raises a bill on the Indian customer, he would further charge the GST on the transaction.
So this is applicable on ocean freight or even on other activities like haulage, customs clearance, warehousing, or it's only on what? If it's
a basic principle, Nilesh, if you are dealing with an Indian customer, the place where the activity happens becomes totally redundant. It is of no consequence. If you are raising on an Indian any invoice on an Indian customer, please make it engraved in your heart that you have to pay a GST, unless it is something like an air freight, which is exempt.
Okay, thank you. So friends are all, I hope.
The GST said.
Sheila, can you please put yourself on mute, or are you
मीटिंग ठेवले ते लॉगिन नाही होत बोलत होते तिला बोला लॉगिन होता अटेंड कर.
Administration, can you please mute?
I can actually find out. One sec. I'm trying to.
Yeah. Okay. The next question is. The next question is, kindly advise how to invoice invoices in our tax invoice. Should it be part of tax invoice or should it be part of a separate invoice? So we are facing GSTR.
Yeah, so I would believe the best case scenario is to have 2 documents. One is for the agency and the taxable component, and another one is for the pass-throughs, which is reimbursement. For the pass-throughs, you should have supporting documents and the amounts charged at like amount. And there should be 2 separate invoice series. That is the best case scenario. Now, I'm aware that many logistics companies have their own systems, and those systems perhaps are not geared up to have these types of different invoices. At times, clients also do not accept separate invoices. So if you are having a single document, in that document, the bare minimum would be that there has to be a line level breakup, and that breakup is supported by exact amount of documentation from a third party as an attachment. But my first case answer is that there has to be 2 separate documents, and that is least litigative in terms of the department interactions.
Thank you. Thank you, Sunil. What is the GST applicable for profit share? I presume it's straight 18%, whatever is the profit share.
I think we did answer this question. Depending on the nature of the profit share, the answers will change.
Okay. Thank you.
Because 2 situations I had dealt with, and I think then the third question came from Raj. So all the 3 situations we have dealt with in terms of the profit share.
Okay. Correct. A very interesting question. What if a CHA issues a consignment note? Should the CHA still pay GST on RCM? It's in a way contradiction, but please, it is interesting to answer this question.
No, Nilesh, I am aware that while this might apparently appear as a contradistinction or a conflict, this is evolving. And in fact, one of my slides did talk about it from a domestic perspective, where we had an interposed logistics company. So what's happening is practically the reverse charge mechanism is to be paid by the person who pays the freight. Now, let's look at a typical case of a custom house agent. He pays a freight of 5,000. Now, because of the business realities, he wants to charge 10,000 from the customer. So, and we are all aware of the ground level practices that this does happen very regularly. Now, if he has to recover 10,000 from the customer because the negotiated agency charges are low and he wants to make a profit here, naturally, he cannot claim the benefit of pure agent and reimbursement.
Correct.
Therefore, he has to charge GST on 10,000.
He has to charge GST on 10,000.
Because it's not only on the profit margin. Moment there is a margin, you have to charge on everything. Now, the problem with the customer's side is the customer says, look, you are collecting road transport charges from me. So why should I pay you 18% tax when this is a road transportation, which ideally should be RCM under 5%? So the customers then start debates and fighting with the CHA. So many CHAs, either through group companies or within the same entity, they have started disregarding the GTA consignment note, and they prepare their own consignment note, and they say that, look, our own arm is a GTA. And they issue a separate transport invoice to the exporter saying that, look, this is the 10,000 is my GTA transport, you pay RCM yourself. Okay. I think that this is a possibility, and definitely there's nothing in the GST law stopping you from doing that. If this works in your favor, there's nothing in the GST law stopping you from doing that.
After this session gets over, point or the question gets over, I'm going to take a little time of yours on the GTA and the impact of taxation based on the documentary evidence, which I will come to this a little later. But I hope this is addressed, this question of Mr. Prakash is addressed. If not, we will take it up further once all those questions are answered. So question is, suppose there is a transportation of goods by road, both supplier and the recipient of the services in India, but the destination of goods is outside India. What is the place of service? Is the place of service outside India, or is it covered under exports?
This is a major challenge, and which I just touched upon, that in this example, the place of supply will be outside India. But because both the parties are in India, the transaction does not constitute an export of service. Therefore, you still have to charge the tax to the customer. Now, because the place of supply is outside India, you have to charge IGST instead of CGST, SGST. Now, this creates a conflict in many cases. And I'm aware, especially the courier agencies were the first ones to adapt this change. But this is a major challenge which is faced by many people in terms of systems.
So typically, if I'm delivering some goods to an Indian exporter to Nepal by road, I will charge them the transport haulage charges and tell them either RCM or 12% or 18%, whatever is my system, right?
No. See, RCM will apply only if you are into road transportation. It does not apply in ocean and air transportation. So, is the question on road transportation?
Yeah, this question is very specific. Suppose there is a transportation of goods by road. Both the supplier and recipients are in India, and the destination of the goods is outside India.
Yes. So in that case, RCM will be applicable, and the person who has appointed you will have to pay the GST.
Okay, fine. Okay. Question is, if we are not paid for our invoices and we have paid GST on it, can we reverse the GST on the short paid GST cycle in the next cycle? Let me understand this question. Sorry, in case we have not paid for our.
I think the question is on input tax credit of the taxes charged by the vendors and the shipping lines. I would believe that yes, you can claim the credit, but the law requires you to make the payment to the vendor within a period of 180 days. If you have not paid to the vendor within 180 days, then you have to reverse the credit, and only when you pay to the vendor, you will reclaim the credit.
Okay. So your next question is also answered about GST, whether RCM or FCM in respect of profit share on a principal to principal model. Mr. Ramesh, this has been answered that it is on a transaction type of transaction, the tax will be applicable. So I will move forward to the next question. Freight was located in India and registered in the G-Zone. I'll have to read this question. Hold on. The freight forwarder is located in India, registered under GST, rendered the following supply of transport of goods in a vessel and other incidental to logistics services to the client located based in Dubai to export cargo. Ocean freight. I think we've answered this third country question, so we can move forward on this. Mr. Kisan, I hope your question is answered in the earlier point which was raised.
Hello. Can I?
Yes. Yes.
Sir,
yes,
only,
please, Kisan,
sir,
can you explain?
Yeah. Sir, the point to the extent the party, the billing, recipient is located in India, that you answered. But in this case, even the supplier, to whom I am billing is also outside India. It's not a local party. It's a back-to-back transaction. See, I'll be billing to a Dubai party, and I have got a supplier to render the services. So they will be raising the bills on me. So the place of supply
so sorry.
Outside India, and the parties are also outside India.
Sorry, I missed the last two queries of yours. Sorry. So, Sunil Bhai, the service receiver is outside India.
Nilesh Bhai, you may need to repeat the entire facts. I'm not very clear. If you can just...
So I'll start again.
Yeah.
So there is a service. The customer is outside India, the recipient of service. The provider of the service is outside India. The origin of the cargo is outside India. The destination of the cargo is outside India.
Okay.
Indian company, Indian freight forwarder is taking this whole transaction and servicing the final recipient of the services with the help of his counterpart, which is the service provider. All the activity and the place of supply is outside India. The service provider and the recipient is outside India. That is the vendor, I mean. So did I explain
so what's the question? If nobody is in India, then what's the question?
Is that transaction taxable when I am raising an invoice on my customer? And what?
Who are you and who is the customer?
Yeah, freight forward.
I am the logistics. I'm the logistics service provider in India.
Providing in India.
Third country logistics services to a customer in Dubai.
Okay, so in this case, the destination of goods is outside India.
Yes.
Therefore,
yes,
place of supply is outside India. The customer is also located outside India, so Section 13 will apply. You will be eligible to claim an export benefit on the revenue side. But as I understand, you are an intermediary. Therefore, you will have a freight expense as well as a freight income.
Yes.
Right? So freight income will be an export. There is no challenge on that front. But as far as freight expense is concerned, there also, because the goods are not coming into India, reverse charge will not apply. So I think there's no tax implication.
But that is on the freight. What about customs clearance,
logistics,
transportation activity?
But all of that will also happen outside India, no?
Yes.
So other charges also are related to a place of supply outside India.
So no import of services would apply?
No, it should not apply.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. Is RCM applicable on membership and subscription charges if service is rendered outside India, means import of services?
I would believe that here it would be applicable because this would not fit within the performance-based basket. membership and subscription would be a generic basket, which is the recipient-based basket. And therefore, on that remittance, you need to pay the RCM and then claim input tax.
So I pay on RCM and I can claim input credit simultaneously.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. The next question is, question of Mr. Keyur Gandhi is answered, so I'm going to move forward. Mr. Kapil. If we are raising invoices to overseas principal, in what we should charge GST on? Kapil, can you explain your question, please? Okay, we move on till Kapil comes. I have not understood this question. Is RCM applicable in case of import of services for door-to-door delivery in case the logistics service rendered to an overseas agent outside India? This is, let's say an overseas agent is giving an Indian logistics company to deliver goods, let's say from outside India up to Pune, which includes road transportation, customs clearance, and ocean freight. And I am collecting this entire amount on RCM from an overseas agent. I'm collecting this amount from an overseas agent. Is this transaction, when I'm raising an invoice, does it attract GST, and how do I account for this transaction?
I am not clear how RCM comes into place here, because the money is, according to me, you would receive the money from the overseas agent. And therefore, you have to examine forward charge and not reverse charge. Unless I have misunderstood the question. According to me, this is revenue for the Indian company. If it is a revenue income for the Indian company, you have to examine forward charge. And my answer to that is that yes, tax would be payable, because these are all related to performance of services in the Indian territory. Even though you receive money from the foreign agent in foreign currency, tax is payable.
I hope, Mr. Basu, your question is answered. If not, you can come online.
But let me re-clarify, this is not RCM, this is normal tax.
Forward. Yeah, normal forward, yes. Can we use line heading as agency service charges towards service charges? I don't see any challenge or difficulty, but Sunil Bhai.
Yeah, I think end of the day, description is not the key parameter. Okay. You can write whatever is closer to your business.
Okay. What if counterpart overseas agent is raising an invoice of a profit share on Indian company when profit share is share of Indian freight revenue? It comes under import of services and we have to pay GST under RCM. But would it be applicable on air freight share since air freight itself is exempt? So it's basically sharing of, profit share on air freight. How do we treat that transaction?
So just to reiterate, in my presentation, I would like to present two scenarios. And in both the scenarios, the roles and responsibilities of the parties become very important. I am aware, even in my talk, I had said that this industry does not have a formal communication between the agents and the Indian counterpart. And to a large extent, this is undocumented in terms of what is a profit share or what is the roles and responsibilities of the parties. But assume end of the day, that document will be required. If that document is not there, you can have very uncomfortable answers from the revenue and very uncertain answers to that extent. Assuming that there are documentation, you will have to go and analyze what is the nature of the documentation. What is the role of the parties? Is it a principal to principal or is it a principal to agent relationship? And accordingly, the tax implications will have to be taken into account. If it's a principal to agent relationship, then on the agency charges, naturally there will be a GST implication. If it's a principal to principal, then you'll go by the freight, and depending on whether it's an ocean or an air freight, you can take a position that it is continuing to remain exempted as a trader of freight. But all of this will depend on exactly how your documents are structured, how your conduct is, and how your remittances are.
So, Mr. Nitin, I think you need to expand your question, or you can write to us and we'll try and get you an answer, because this question of yours does need a little bit of a detailed discussion and a little more of detailed input from you, Mr. Nitin. So I will move forward. You are free to write to us on this point if you're not convinced with the answer or you're not clear with the answer. In case of DTP shipment, service provider in India and the tax invoice is being raised to the Indian customer, what should be the GST rate on duty paid on behalf of the Indian customer?
I would assume that in a DDP shipment, so you are saying export DDP or is this an import DDP?
Import DDP.
Import DDP, the customer would be overseas, no?
Sorry, it is export DDP.
Export DDP, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so you have an export DDP and you are raising charges to the Indian customer who is shipping some goods on a DDP basis to the end customer. In that scenario, clearly, whatever you charge will be liable for GST unless there is a specific exemption. So, depending on the line item which you will have either 5%, 18% or nil.
No, I am specifically asking on the duty amount.
Which duty amount? Customs duty?
The customs duty, which is our overseas agent.
That will be a reimbursement, no? Because you will be collecting it on a like-to-like basis. So
yeah, but there is always going to be a difference on the exchange rate. When we are billing it to an Indian party, no? Like he will be giving us an US dollar at $100.
So long as the difference is only to the extent of exchange difference, I think it can be explained, and I would still believe it's a reimbursement.
Okay, thank you.
So that's another question which I want to discuss with you, if time permits, is a contract of a DDP versus a bill of lading. Because there are some contracts which we have a composite contract for performing certain activities, but a bill of lading is issued port to port. So we'll come to that point a little later, and let's finish the questions which are raised here first. We are a CHA using vehicles on hire outside from outside market. My concern is CHA duty is concerned. So the question of Mr. Prakash is that he's a CHA who is using outside vehicles and using the services of transporters. Vehicles owners do not charge GST as they declare themselves as exempt under the notification, and which states the services, and they declare it as a higher charges. Am I right, Mr. Nitin? So the GTA is raising an invoice of higher charges on you, is my understanding. Is a CHA qualified as a GTA? The consignment note is issued by the CHA. Now, can the CHA invoice the transport charges at 12% forward charge? In my opinion, yes. If the service, your transporter is charging you on higher charges, and you are doing a forward bill, you can charge 12%. Am I right, Sunil bhai?
Yes, I don't think there is any prohibition against that. Only caveat is that as an entity, you cannot have 12 as well as 5 RCM. You will have to choose either 12 for everything or either 5 for everything.
Okay. So let me take 2 minutes or 5 minutes on this point, because this is and I feel there are a lot of different practices on transportation in the industry. So I'm going to take 3-4 minutes of all our members right now. Sunil bhai, the situation is the service provider is giving a service of let's say of higher charges. The CHA in turn will raise a 5% service charge, or he will charge a 12% or 18% and issue its own consignment note. There is no confusion on this case. But what if the transporter raises a 5% reverse charge invoice on the custom house agent or the freight forwarder can the freight forwarder then issue a 12% invoice on the customer? Now,
I would
here
believe
there
yes.
is an
I am
LR
aware.
issued.
According
The
to me,
LR is
you
issued
can.
by the transporter. Sorry, I just finished. The LR is issued by the transporter, and for the sake of our comfort, we are issuing a consignment note for against our invoice. Now, typically the LR which is moving with the cargo, I'm not getting into the e-way bill right now. But typically the LR which moves with the cargo, and typically the consignee signs normally the LR, receipt of the goods. What is the treatment on such a transaction?
So yes, this we have examined in extreme detail, and I am aware that there are a couple of advanced rulings on this issue. And the moot point which comes, I think, Nilesh, here is whether a single shipment of goods or a transportation of goods can have more than one consignment goods. I think if we are able to address that question, I think most of the questions can get addressed. I am aware that under the earlier law and for general industry practice also, typically we say there is one consignment note whereby X becomes a bailee of the goods. The transporter becomes a bailee of the goods. He becomes responsible for the safekeeping of the goods till the time the consignment note or the LR reaches, the goods reach the destination and are delivered to the consignee, and the final endorsement as delivery happens on the document. All of this, I am aware, also has a little bit of a backing from the Carriage of Goods Act. From the earlier the Carriers Act, I understand, there are specific provisions dealing with these types of transactions. However, there is a subtle difference between the words used in different places. So if you refer the Carriage Act, it uses the word goods forwarding note. Again, they say by whatever name called, but they use the word goods forwarding note. The GST law chooses to use the word consignment note. And the industry always understands this either as a bilty or as a lorry receipt. Ultimately, all these words are used for a similar type of a document. And there is an understanding or a general feeling that there can be only one such document. I would believe there is nothing in the law which stops a person from issuing two consignment notes. So for the same transaction, there can be two consignment notes. One issued by the real GTA and another one issued by the CHA. And if there are two consignment notes, the first one can be disregarded and the second one becomes the consignment note, treating the transaction as a GTA. And therefore, to summarize the question specifically asked by you, it is possible that the first person might say 5% RCM, give it to me as a CHA. I will discharge RCM, claim input tax credit, and discharge 12% for a forward charge. According to me, that's perfectly in order.
But my consignment note is only a document for the invoice, but not a document for road transportation. Is it? It's okay.
It's okay. Because end of the day, you are still doing transportation. As a contract, you are responsible for transportation.
So as a contract, I am a principal to principal in all.
Yes,
all
that is important. That is important.
Okay, fine. Remittance made overseas against invoices service provided outside. Okay, in case 1 minute. Huh? In case of transport charges, point for this. I think we've covered most of the questions for now. Sure. Are there any specific questions missed out? Can you please come forward?
Yeah, Nilesh, I have one question.
Okay. Yes.
Just in case if our client doesn't pay us, for our invoice, and we have already paid GST on name, how do we go about it? Like, can we reverse that GST in the next billing cycle or next GST cycle, or the
Strictly
GST?
No. The moment you have raised an invoice, the tax becomes due. Whether you collect it late from your customer, whether you don't collect it, government says it is not my headache. The tax which you have paid is lost.
But what happens if the customer doesn't pay for the period of 6 months?
No, that's fine.
Also.
For you, it's the tax is lost. Nothing happens at your end.
Oh, okay.
There is no adjustment for bad debts under GST.
No, so the customer that cannot claim credit, but I have to pay the tax.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So I'll just go through some other questions which was earlier discussed. You have covered most of them. But Sunil bhai, one question is that typically when we get into a contract with a customer, we have a composite contract from point-to-point service. Let's say from a factory in Pune to a delivery point in Zurich, which is also a landlocked delivery receiving point. My contract says I will charge 10,000 rupees, for example. But for some practical reason or whatever the reason is, I'm issuing a port-to-port bill of lading. I'm issuing a bill of lading from Mumbai or from Nhava Sheva to, let's say, Antwerp, but I'm still delivering the cargo up to Zurich. How is this treated? Is a bill of lading an important document for interpretation of the law, or is the contract an important document for interpretation of the law?
It's a very tricky question because I started my entire discussion with that question itself. I would believe that a contract is a more important document than any other document. But having said that, I am aware that the industry invariably has divided the contract into multiple deliverables. And if they have done that, left, right, and center, I am aware that each of the charges are separately charged for and accounted for and separately taxed. So the ground level practice, which has been accepted by at least for more than a decade now, is something which is very different than what could be the legal implications, assuming it's a single contract. So I don't want to turn the apple cart today and confuse all the 100 members, because if I say it's a single contract, it will have a very, very different tax implication. Then what? And all the answers, right from the destination charges, many questions which have been asked today. See, all said and done,
I got it.
It becomes very complicated for all these members to then appreciate the the nuances of those issues. So I would not want to really spend too much time.
Okay. Now I am told that there are some members who have received a similar show cause notice under the GST regime, which was there earlier in the service tax on the freight difference. What does it mean under GST?
Answers would be same. You will have to just keep on fighting with patience. That's all.
Okay, fine. That's all. Is there a difference where I have issued a bill of lading, I have not issued a bill of lading? Does it matter?
You are issuing a house bill of lading, definitely supports your case much stronger. But even if you have not issued a house bill of lading, I would believe the answers would remain the same. Because there are many corroborative and circumstantial evidences which can be presented.
Because my debate on this is I have a contract and I am a principal to principal the minute I have a contract.
Yes. So only contract may not be sufficient. There are many other circumstantial evidences also which can be laid down. And all of them will be important. Because when we drafted responses to a few of the show cause notices, I can tell you, we would have drafted around 30 to 35 responses to show cause notices from our office. Now, while some arguments were similar, the extent of documentation at each of those 35 entities was very different. And accordingly, some arguments kept on changing. Somebody incurred a loss, somebody was doing consolidation. So all those factors will become important.
Okay. Okay. Because bill of lading is just a condition to my contract that I'm supposed to issue a bill of lading.
So if you have issued a bill of lading, that is our first major ground of argument. But just because there is no bill of lading, we would still search for other arguments and corroborations to prove that it is a prime principle to principle agreement.
Okay. There's one question which has just come in from from Tejal. How many years we can claim input credit of previous years? Can we pay GST of a particular vendor once we get benefit?
I think it's a bit open-ended question, but if I've understood her question well, the first time claim of credit, you have to claim by the September of the next year, which means that if you receive an invoice which is dated financial year 2021, you have to claim the credit before the September. That is the first question. I think the second question which they are trying to ask is, having claimed the credit, is it important for me to use it on the same day? The answer is no. Once you have claimed the credit in your return and it comes in your ledger, what is known as an electronic credit ledger, you can use it immediately. You can use it 1 year or 2 years down the line also.
Okay. We have 12 more minutes, so I'll just raise 1 or 2 more questions which I had received earlier, and then we will sum it up. Sunil Bhai, if you don't mind. Sure. I did read your message about you have another meeting at 5:30.
Yeah, because originally we were talking about 4 to 5, so I scheduled something else at 5:30.
Yeah. No. I even, you engrossed us so much that you can see the number of questions that I've got here and on email that I've received. Yeah. Okay. I know you have answered this, but I don't know whether, at least I still would like to question it, is that I have an overseas customer who is telling me to raise an invoice or to just do pure transportation for an export cargo from Pune to Nhava Sheva. And I'm only supposed to charge them for transportation. I'm not booking the freight. I'm not involved in customs clearance. How do I treat this particular transaction? And I have taken the option of 12% forward charge. Sorry?
Yeah, so you will have to pay 12% forward charge as a GTM.
And it becomes a cost.
Yeah, unless you are able to recover it from the customer.
Yeah, I mean, customer, because it becomes a cost at one end, in short.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So friends, I have covered most of the questions. I hope everything is covered. We have exactly, I would say, 5 or 6 minutes left. So if there is anything that anybody would like to raise, a question or two only, we will keep the floor open, please.
Nilesh, I have a counter question to my question earlier. If the client has not paid me, as Sunil Bhai told that, the tax is gone to the government, is my client able to claim that credit in his books because he has, kind of taken into his account, or he will also not be able to claim that credit?
No, because there is one more rule which says that if you are not paid within 180 days, the credit is not available. So therefore, the client also will not get the credit. You will also not get the money back. It's a dead cost.
Okay. So I think let's, can I have vote of thanks? Is Sam there, please? I'd seen him earlier. It'd be nice. Sam, are you there?
Yeah, I can see him.
Vasant, can you do the needful for me, please? Vote of thanks on behalf of the association.
Yeah. Prashant is doing the vote of thanks. Prashant, please.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, Prashant, please. Sorry, over to you, Prashant.
No.
Nilesh, I'm there, but
yes.
Okay, let Prashant go ahead.
Sam, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Prashant. Go ahead.
On behalf of MTI, I would like to thank Mr. Sunil Kabawala to spare his valuable time and giving a lot of insight to us. And a special thanks to Mr. Nilesh Gandhi for moderating this session. Thank you so much for being there in large numbers.
So, Sunil Bhai, I would like to just share that we have 79 participants. So you've broken our earlier record. So thank you, Sunil Bhai.
Thank you.
We had a participant which had reached 100 actually. Now last minute people just left. Yeah.
Correct. So Sunil bhai, you can see how important you are to our industry. So please continue
it's my
supporting
pleasure and
us. Thank
privilege.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.